Hey everybody, we're going to get started. I'm Mary Jane Weiss and just want to welcome you on behalf of Melmark to our expert speaker series. And today we have Val Demiri, who is going to talk to us about interdisciplinary collaboration in ABA. And Val's been working in interdisciplinary contexts for her whole life. I think her whole professional life. And I know her from many years ago, including many years that we overlapped at Rutgers University, where she ran the early intervention program for the Douglas Developmental Disability Center. Since then, we've collaborated. She's an instructor at Endicott College, and she's also a behavior analyst at the Hopewell Valley Regional School District in New Jersey. And I thought she'd be a good person to come talk to us about this topic because I've always admired her collaboration skill set, and I feel like that's one of the things that sometimes is most challenging about the work we do, whether we work in a specialized setting like many of us do, or whether we interact with people in other kinds of settings. And so I know that she'll have a lot of lessons to share with us about her experiences, and I hope that you will all also give her lots of feedback and suggestions for topics as well. I promise that you'd be a very engaged audience. You can't let me down. So thanks, and without further ado, I'll turn it over to Val.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for that introduction, Mary Jane. I was just thinking for the moment how, one of the reasons I feel personally that I feel like I'm successful at collaboration is because I'm so afraid of people not liking me. So I'll just do anything to make people happy, within reason, of course. So I think that's a little bit of a motivating factor for me. So with that in mind, I am here to talk about interdisciplinary collaboration in our field of high behavior analysis. And I do want to... Sorry. Oh, there we go. It's working. Thanks. I do want to acknowledge people both past and present in my professional life that have really contributed to helping me develop as a professional, both in my behavior analytics skills, also as a clinical and school psychologist by training. And there have been many people, throughout my professional career who I work with that have helped to develop that aspect of myself. And it includes parents, nurses, occupational therapists, speech and language therapists, other psychologists, and teachers. So I wouldn't be the person I am today without acknowledging all these people. I have just one technological issue. My slide is so small that I can't see. I'll look here. Some of the objectives that I hope we can cover today is to examine the definitions of terms like collaboration and interdisciplinary. Also, we want to examine the ethical codes that dictate how we behave as professionals, and I thought we'd look at some of the codes across other disciplines. Especially as they're related to collaboration. And we're going to review a little bit of the research that's out there in collaboration, as well as identify some of the strategies for collaboration, and then look at our own field and what we can do to build more collaboration. So to start with, interdisciplinary, the definition here, refers to applied within education and training pedagogies to describe studies that use methods and insights of several established disciplines or traditional fields of study. Interdisciplinarity involves researchers, students, and teachers in the goals of connecting and integrating several academic schools of thought, professions, or technologies along with their specific perspectives in pursuit of a common task. I don't know about you, but that pretty much sounds a lot of like what we do in applied behavior analysis in terms of using our training and education to work on socially significant issues that concern all people. So this is one definition that I came across in the literature. Collaboration is really, I felt, well defined in the health field, so like nurses and medical doctors have a very good working definition. In healthcare, it's defined as professionals assuming complementary roles and working in cooperation with each other, sharing responsibility and problem solving. Again, all in helping to make decisions and to formulate and carry out plans for patient care. Another interesting definition that I came across that really is highlighted in the bottom here is that teams work collaboratively to obtain greater resources and recognition and reward when facing competition from finite resources. So, as we all know, having a working definition of what we're trying to change, so target behavior, is always helpful. So being able to define what collaboration is and what interdisciplinary means can help us to understand what we're working towards as a goal, and also to measure that. So going outside of our field into the health world, others seem to be thinking about collaboration a lot. In a study that was done by Nan Caro in 2013, this was a study in England where they did a sort of canvassing of the research to see what definitions are out there. They did highlight how the terms inter and multi-professional might be a little bit more restrictive and narrower in terms of the people that are working within the field, versus inter and multidisciplinary. It has a more broader and more inclusive definition, and it also includes professionals and non-professionals, which I know is very germane to what we do, since we work often with paraprofessionals who support the services of the students that we teach. So this group of researchers did find that there were numerous terms out there for collaboration, for interdisciplinary, and they also mentioned that there's different processes within teams as well as different teams. So depending on the context that you're in or where you're working, there just may be a different kind of definition for collaboration. So as you can imagine, there's like all these terms out there, and I don't think we've done a good job defining that yet for our field. But there is information out there that we can draw upon from other fields. So why do we collaborate? Like, why do we collaborate now? You can ask yourself, maybe because you were asked to, or maybe because there's a legal issue going on and you're kind of being put in a position where you have to cooperate and work with other people, other disciplines. Maybe you want to collaborate. There's many different questions that we can ask. And then we will also look at the reasons why we need to collaborate. And if we're talking about the field of autism, which I don't want to limit it to just that, but certainly within autism spectrum disorder, this is an area where there's an increasing number in the amount of individuals diagnosed with autism, and there is also a long-term need to address the issues that they face. Professionals across disciplines have complex skills that are required to provide the comprehensive care. There's also an increase in specialization amongst BCBAs, so more so today than when I was in school and being trained. There's you got the feeding specialty, or the toilet training specialty, or the social skills aspect, where there's almost like a very highly focused, specific area that we're being trained to, and we're reaching out to other colleagues in order to be able to consult to them and help us understand how it's done. I know when I first started, I just never thought about feeding, it just didn't exist. And now, it's something that you just can't avoid talking about, and looking for consultation to help a lot of individuals, especially on the autism spectrum, that do have those issues. Other important reasons why we would want to collaborate is because the emphasis of schools and organizations really require it. So we are in a multidisciplinary context often, where that is just a requirement. It's expected that you are going to collaborate. Continuity of care, so, it's not just education and school settings that our individuals that we're helping are in. We need to be able to collaborate with pediatricians and psychiatrists and other therapies that are happening outside of the setting that you're in and working in a continuous way. And then other populations and socially significant issues outside of autism spectrum disorder. This is a pretty interesting one, and I really think that the field of behavior analysis could be doing so much more, and probably we are sort of beginning to engage in other areas of or other disciplines to help other people with the science of ABA. But there are the populations that need us, and just a handful that I could come up with is, there's the prison population, there are people who are displaced or traumatized, other types of diseases and disabilities and mental health issues that impact like everyone in society. Something like chemical dependencies, which just this morning I was listening to a program on NPR, and they were saying that there's like 22 million Americans who are affected by dependency on some kind of chemical. And there's certainly room for behavior analysts to be in there helping in terms of behavior change, because that's what we're talking about. And then also Alzheimer's disease. I have come across many individuals who are impacted by that disease and their families, and so how can we help support other people in this, dealing with this societal issue, really? So how do you collaborate? You can ask yourself, like, where do you start? Like, what is the task analysis on this type of behavior that we're trying to engage in? And what's the goal that you have for collaborating? Some of the challenges and barriers to collaboration have definitely been that in the field of applied behavior analysis and also in other fields, like there really is no empirical research out there that has been done to examine this type of behavior. We also don't know what makes a good interdisciplinary team, although there are starting to, some research is starting to surface on this, and I have a couple of studies that I'll share with you in a few slides. But other than these few studies that are out there, there's no real definition or idea of how it works currently. And then, as I said before, just operationally defining what collaboration means is a good place to start. We can also ask ourselves, like, what are we learning in our BACB coursework? I know when I went through my BCBA coursework, I don't remember a specific course on it, and I don't think that it still exists right now, although people are really starting to think about that because it is an issue, and I will share an article with you by Kelly and Tinkani that was done in 2013, where they did a really nice survey of behavior analysts out there and their experience with collaboration and some of the results that they found. So one of the other things that I wanted to share with you is my own personal experience of when I first felt like I had an experience with collaboration in a professional context, and it happened when I was an undergraduate. I went to school at New York University, and I was able to work at Bellevue Hospital, which is a really well-known hospital for it's like a trauma center. And I got to work in what was called a pediatric gynecology clinic, and it was a clinic that served children who were being sexually abused and or abused, and it was where they were sent if they had to be evaluated. My job for my honors thesis was reviewing the charts and the files to see if I could find information on the evaluations that were done where they used anatomically correct dolls. But one of the things that I got to do while I was there is participate in what was called the clinic meetings in the morning. And on that team, there was the sort of medical professional, like the pediatric gynecologist, if you can believe that one exists, it does, who headed the whole team. And this person was very, very skilled. And then there was a nurse and a forensic psychologist, social worker, and other types of assistants who took care of like planning all these meetings and all the services that needed to start occurring for those individuals. In that setting, I remember it was a very potent experience to see how many people, it was literally a team of 7 or 8 people who worked together to help this individual who was in crisis. And it was an experience I really never forgot. And I know that probably not consciously, but maybe not being so aware of it, I've taken from what I learned there. And I was just the observer. I sat quietly inside while they had their meetings because I was there, obviously learning and doing a little internship for my honors thesis. But it was a very potent experience, and I would challenge you to think about those experiences in terms of who you had to collaborate, where it was not just your ABA people. Or the people that you work with on a daily basis, where you might have more comfort, rather than, meeting with another school district or people that you don't necessarily work with on a regular basis. So, in looking at some of the literature, the Manpower study that I just referred to, when they canvassed in the area, it was again not related to ABA, but it was in the health domain. They surveyed more than 250 individuals across 11 types of disciplines, and they took all that data and kind of threw it all together, and they're like, you know what, here are some principles of collaboration that sort of make up a good team. And I thought it was interesting to share this because I think we probably would all agree that these are important characteristics or variables that we need to attend to when collaborating. The one that really stood out for me was respect and understanding, and also leadership and management, because I feel like those have impacted, at least in my experience, how you collaborate. I just wanted to ask by a show of hands, can you just tell me who here is a behavior analyst, or working to become a behavior analyst? Speech therapist? Occupational therapists, nurses, medical doctors, psychiatrists. Okay, so a lot of paraprofessionals who support students throughout the day, and teachers, special education. Okay, great. So another thing I'd like to do is just look at the ethical obligations in varying professions, and I did just a quick sampling. They're in no particular order, it was just what I was thinking in the moment. And we'll just look quickly to see what ethical principles guide these professions, and do they have anything specific written about collaboration in their ethical guides? The medical profession, it was interesting to learn this, but they call their medical ethical statements opinions, and they literally have chapters of opinions. So apparently chapter 10 is an opinion on interprofessional relationships, and it's long. But this opinion offers ethical guidance for physicians. And again, this is exactly how it's written. It's not intended to establish standards of clinical practice or rules of law, but it does state in there that they need to be able to work with other professionals, interdisciplinary, to meet the needs of the patient. And so, of course, this would also apply to psychiatry, which I know we probably work a lot with the psychiatry field. And then another type of physician that we probably work closely with is not just the psychiatrists, but also pediatricians, especially when individuals are first being diagnosed. That's been my experience with early intervention, just kind of being able to engage with them in a discussion of what their recommendations are going to be, and believe it or not, what they write in terms of recommendations and services that children need, it becomes critically important in terms of what they are able to get, both because of insurance purposes, but also educational purposes. So having a working relationship with pediatricians can be very helpful and almost critical, I would say, for the services that an individual is supposed to be able to get. Psychiatrists, I'll have a little bit more to say about that, but they're mostly concerned with medication management, at least in my experience with autism spectrum disorders. But also, they work with mental health issues and often extreme behaviors. So being able to have a relationship with a psychiatrist in terms of interdisciplinary collaboration can really help support certainly the student, but also how the team conceptualizes and thinks about the student in their care. One of the experiences that I've been able to forge in different settings is graphing the behavioral data that we have in our settings and showing that to the psychiatrist based on the medication that they provide. And that I have found has often been very well received by them. And once those relationships are forged, they're often asking for the next set of data. And I feel like they also get to know the person a little bit more other than the anecdotal descriptions that are given, or parents calling with significant concerns to up the dosage of medication or lower the dosage of medication. So being able to really participate and work with a medical professional like a psychiatrist becomes really critical in terms of the care that we can provide. In case you don't know, there was also, I think it's still in existence, but a first science program, which was aimed at helping the medical community, in particular pediatricians, identify signs of autism when it was, sort of like a crisis for people when they weren't knowing how to diagnose it. So again, that's an area of collaboration that becomes critically important in terms of how fast services are garnered by the individual patient. The Teachers Code of Ethics, I wasn't exactly sure which organization to refer to, so I just sampled 3 of them, and they do have some commentary on ethic, principle or an idea that they hold where they stress that collaboration is important. So the National Association for the Education of Young Children, has one that is pretty decent. The Council of Exceptional Children was a little bit more, not exactly clear. And then surprisingly, the National Education Association, I couldn't find any statement about collaboration. So I thought that was interesting in terms of where the emphasis might be in ethics, and considering that teachers are working with multiple professionals in their day, it is interesting that this one organization didn't have it. But for the most part, people are interested in collaboration. So it was nice to see that they have statements about it, or a principle or some kind of idea. In occupational therapy, they're guided by the principle of fidelity. And they very clearly state that you want to promote collaborative actions and communications as a member of the team, and facilitate the quality of care and safety of their clients. And they also, make statements about respecting the competencies of other people. So again, they're very interested in collaborating. With regard to some of my own personal thoughts and observations with occupational therapy and my experiences in collaborating with them, one of the things that I have had to educate myself about is, what is OT? I had to sit down and talk to people and read literature on it to understand what exactly it is that they do. And my most significant experience came with actually working with an occupational therapist who was part of the early intervention team that I headed up at Rutgers University. And I was really surprised to learn that she had said, this is my colleague Jackie Durbus, that there's 7 theories that guide occupational therapy. Maybe there's more or less, but 7 or more. And in comparing that to applied behavior analysis, like we're working with one sort of guiding theory about like how behavior works. They're working with like 7. So I'm like, oh, that must be like really confusing. But once I understood that, it also helped me to understand like, oh, so I can see how sensory integration therapy is pushed, or weighted vests might be pushed, or how ADLs are targeted. So that helped me to understand like the perspective that they're coming with, because in order to be able to collaborate, like it would be very important to understand the perspective of the other profession so that you can have a conversation about it. With regard to certain curricula that might be used, I mean, I've had amazing success with using handwriting without tears to teach like young children how to write, and it works really well, and it's pretty well defined, and never had a problem with it. Same with like sensible pencil. So like then it just becomes like a preference choice of which ones you're going to use. And these are curricula that were developed, by occupational therapists. And we also can say the same thing about applied behavior analysis. Like we use curricula like the ABLES or the BCBA-D or the ABLES to address a large array of skills. And certainly other fields and our own field can argue that none of these have been empirically validated, but they're informed by the science of behavior analysis, and they're informed by people's experiences, clinicians who have worked, for many years with teaching the certain skills that we're trying to teach. So even though they don't have an empirical sort of backing as a curriculum, we can't just dismiss it. And I know in our field we don't dismiss something like the ABLES or the BCBA-D. I mean, maybe some people do. I don't know. I don't know why they would, but we don't want to have that attitude for other fields until we can see what's been done, for how long it's been done, and ask some detailed questions about the theory behind it. Other things that I've done is to observe how materials are used. So with occupational therapy, like, I remember being taught like, oh, sensory, and people bring out bins of like light balls and squishy things and Play-Doh, and at first I was taught like, don't even look at this stuff because you don't do that as a behavior analyst. And then you kind of watch how people actually use these materials and for what reasons, and certainly touching items for sensory, for lack of a better term, sensory input to explore your world. Like that's how we are. We have the sense of touch is a good thing. Like that is feedback that we have, and we learn from that. So whether you use it as part of reinforcement or redirection or distracting someone from some other behavior, knowing the materials that other professions use and why they use them really helps us to understand what is being done. And if we still can't understand, then we should be asking questions like, oh, why are you using that weighted vest? Like, what's it supposed to accomplish? We have information on that. We know that a lot of the practices that may be in place with some occupational therapy interventions do not have an empirical basis, but at the same time, they're being used a lot, especially sensory integration types of interventions. And then we have to ask, well, what is the purpose? Why are they using it? What's the outcome and what's the goal? And how can we help move things along, make recommendations, maybe just understand the perspective so that we can have an informed decision? Because I think the last thing we want to do is go in, with like a bat saying, well, this doesn't work, there is no evidence, and because that automatically creates like a barrier to further discussion about it. And I was actually quite surprised to find that the occupational therapy field has like at least 2 articles that I read where they're questioning, some of these interventions, and it's been published, where they're saying sensory integration really has very weak support, yet 90% of occupational therapists out there use sensory integration in some form. They'll say the same thing that our field says, ABA is not DTI, well, OT is not sensory integration. So they're starting to use almost like a parallel kind of language that behavior analysts use to help inform their field as they're sorting through and figuring out what it means to get evidence-based and empirically supported. So I'll share that article in just a second. So again, in thinking of occupational therapists, they really have some really good expertise, and I've learned a lot myself on how to understand physical development of hand use, right? Like different grasps and where you start, depending on how old you are. And I got to see this firsthand working with really young kids, 12-month-old, 18-month-old, 2-year-olds. And it's important to know, when you're picking up a pencil or doing a weight grasp or learning to write, there's different phases of development that a person is going to be in and how you're going to use a tool to be able to teach a skill. Occupational therapy really understands that, and they can help inform how we do it. Ball play, throwing a ball, tossing a ball, as a behavior analyst when I was trained, I wasn't thinking about any of that because I don't know physical development in that way. But working with another occupational therapist, we did some really important skill development because of just the mechanics of how behavior is done. Task analysis, very good at that. They really know how to break down steps of a behavior. And in particular, our ADLs, right? So the mechanics of things like eating and toileting and dressing. We have a lot that we can draw from in the occupational therapy field. One of the experiences that I had at Rutgers was working with a child who was severely impaired with cerebral palsy, and he was a 2-year-old. And he really had a lot of balance issues and very hard for him to walk. And we were very lucky that we had an early intervention team that had a speech therapist, an OT, a BCBA, and teachers, special education teachers. And one of the goals that the child had was to be able to navigate his natural environment and walk without falling. So to help increase that skill, I thought it was just so brilliant, but one of the things that the occupational therapist recommended was, let's take all the pillows on the couch, we're going to throw them on the floor, and this kid is going to hold our hand and walk across the pillows. So there were bouncy pillows and uneven surfaces. We just created that in their natural environment where every day they had to practice. I mean, we walked it ourselves just to see how it feels. But it made a huge difference in this child's ability to be able to walk from across the room in his living room to the other end, which you could not do without practicing how to walk and build muscle or build whatever it was. That was the way we targeted. And that came from the occupational therapist that was on the team, who happened to also be a BCBA, so that really helped us. And another skill that we taught was he had a really hard time climbing and moving his legs, so we would just do things that were really simple, but again, brilliant. He couldn't, we would put the scraper toys on the far side of the couch, he was little. So in order to get this toy, he had to climb the couch. And so by just placing it in a certain way and having another pillow where he could step up, and this is the way kids learn to climb and walk, and they're stepping all over stuff. But for him, we had to really be specific and create that opportunity so that he can just, challenge himself physically to get up on the couch or to walk across the room. And although feeding was not a specialty that we focused in at that time, the occupational therapist was able to, based on some of the knowledge that she had acquired, work on just where you place food in the mouth on the molars, just to be able to first bite down on soft mechanicals like cheese. So again, as a behavior analyst, as a psychologist, I just wasn't thinking that. I didn't know. I had to educate myself about that. And since then, I've certainly increased my knowledge about feeding and what we can do to help individuals on the spectrum and probably others to work on those skills of chewing. But at that time, you know, I had to listen to the OT because she knew and I did not. Some information that I found from a conference at the AOGA conference, the Association of Occupational Therapy. I probably said that wrong, but it's the occupational therapy conference that is well known and happens annually, just like our own conference. Watling, Scheibel, and Alexander presented this whole workshop that I thought was really detailed and very well put together in terms of collaboration with applied behavior analysis and behavior analysts. And they presented on collaborative habits and other kinds of habits, but one of them was collaboration. And what they did was they identified, some steps to consider when you need to collaborate and how you're going to improve your own skills with that. And they had a little rating scale, right? This frequently happens, sometimes happens, never happens. And if it was never, like, what are you going to do? What's your goal? What's your plan? Like, what's your IEP for this skill to be attained? And I thought that the 8 items that they listed was really pretty good. I would agree that all of these things are important for collaboration. And they also had a feel of evidence-based and data-oriented, right? So you're starting to see people really talk about that really does matter. So whatever the motivation for that is, I think it's really important because that's what we're always saying. So other fields are starting to say the same thing. It seems like it is. And then there was a little article that was written by Nancy Pollock. She basically reviews sensory integration and kind of talks about the state of the evidence. And this is where I believe she's from Canada, and she states, that the evidence for the types of interventions we have studied to date is weak. Yet a significant proportion of OTs reported that they continue to use sensory integration as a primary intervention approach. Right? So this is an OT who's highly regarded in her field. Is publishing in I believe it's Occupational Therapy Now. I don't think it's a peer-reviewed journal, but it's a journal that many OTs are able to access. We can all access it, it's online for free. And she's saying that we need to be very careful that the appeal of a treatment approach that, unlike many of the other approaches, was developed by an occupational therapist, doesn't overshadow our commitment to evidence-based practice and to the provision of the highest quality of care to our clients. And she's saying the same thing that applied behavior analysts have said, right? Like for maybe, other treatments in other fields, that these things are very time intensive. Like, where are we allocating our efforts, our money, our expertise? We need to be very careful about that. I saw a hand.
I was just going to say that it really reminds me of the controversy in speech and language pathology.
It reminds me of controversy in speech and language pathology around oral motor exercises.
Yes.
There's a very similar problem there. Oral motor exercises being used to increase articulation doesn't work. And it's been pretty definitively shown to not work well, particularly for kids on the spectrum. And yet, something like 80% of speech and language pathologists report using oral motor exercises, even though ASH has a petition statement against it.
Right.
And so I kind of feel like it's a similar sort of a thing where the field is really stating the importance of evidence-based practice. Research is showing that this particular intervention doesn't have the evidence it needs to be used, but there's still a gap between what the field has determined, both scientifically and just in terms of the commitment to evidence-based practice, but what practitioners out there are doing.
Right.
And so maybe it's like not really unique to OT, but it's something that happens in other disciplines as well.
Right. Yeah, and I think one of the things that really stood out with this article is Nancy Pollock talks about, parents, they're not interested in the controversies of our terminology and what we're using. They just want to see their kid get better. So whatever the internal fighting is, or the cross-disciplinary fights are, or, controversies are, in the end, it's the individual that's affected, and parents really just want to get what's best, and they will not leave any stone unturned, as we all know. But it seemed hopeful to me that I'm finding articles like that, and I didn't have to do like a big search. It was like, oh, look at what they're saying about collaboration and OT. It was nice, and they're doing workshops about it. So it is nice to see that we can try and find commonalities of our fields now, right? We want evidence-based practices to be used, and similar to our field, like their field is founded on science, and there to help with socially significant behaviors. They did a lot of work, I believe, right after World War I and II to help veterans coming home and being functional and being able to function in their occupations. So that's where it all started, and how they moved away from that is like a whole other discussion, but it seems like there are people out there who are really trying to adhere to the science that they believe they're a part of. So again, now I know, like, oh, there's 7 different kinds of theories that you operate from, and there is a lot of evidence base for some of the things you do, but maybe not a lot for the other things that you do. Starting a conversation there is really good in terms of collaboration across fields. So speech and language therapists, they definitely have lots of ethical principles that they follow. They want to uphold dignity and autonomy of what their profession does. They have a rule of ethics that describes working collaboratively when appropriate with members. So it was interesting to see like the nuances in how they phrase what it means to work collaboratively. And our field does that too. So I think we'll have more questions when I get to BACB ethics. But overall, it's always about the client. They want quality of the care of the client. Everybody should work together, but you're going to have a little bit of discretion when you're doing that. Donaldson and Stammer in 2014 do a really good job of explaining in this article ABA to their field. Now, as a person who's a behavior analyst reading their article, like I found myself getting a little critical at times because like they didn't exactly define verbal behavior the way I would define it, or they didn't exactly. I'm like, hey man, they're talking about verbal behavior, or they're talking about pivotal response training and how it's similar to their milieu therapy. So they're trying to find commonalities. They're emphasizing data collection and evidence-based practices, but they did a very nice job in presenting speech through an applied behavior analysis lens to their own field in their own literature. I haven't seen one in our literature yet. How they present OT or speech. I've seen the critical articles and the ones that tell us to be aware of like sensory integration and things like that, and that is also needed. But I haven't seen any sort of reaching out like let's look at your field from our lens. Has anybody seen an article like that? I'd love to read one. So the thing that stood out for me with their article is like they were really taking it upon themselves to explain ABA to their profession and to draw upon the commonalities and to again encourage collaboration. I think it's important for us to look at that literature too, because I've also felt that in reading some of these articles that they kind of throw us in the functional behavior assessment world. Like, oh, we know behavior, so we're going to deal with like those challenging behaviors, and we're going to do all these FBAs, and kind of a little bit seem to not disregard, but like the emphasis is more on FBAs because they don't do that, clearly don't do that, and everything else is fair game across disciplines. So I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. But again, if we're going to look at the positive aspects, like they're just talking about ABA in their own journals and in their own field. So areas that we can learn from with in regards to speech and language therapies, communication, using other forms of communication. So, speech therapists are really excellent at understanding of metative and alternative communication devices. If you consider just like the explosion of the amazing amount of apps you have to work on communication, it's Protocol Go, Touch Chat, or all these other tools that we have, versus what we had just like maybe 5 years ago or a decade ago, with big heavy boxes and tiny boxes walking around. Like, they have a lot to contribute to the field, to us in terms of understanding, how to work on communication and other forms are being used. I know there's controversies, obviously with all of it, including sign language and hex and gestures in terms of who ascribes to this or not. But, we all know like something like picture exchange communication system has a large supported literature in terms of its efficacy and its evidence base. And speech therapists understand that too. And now all these other areas, we still need to consider, some of the research there. But, if we're talking about even simple things like, teaching a certain gesture to be communicative, they know what they're talking about, and we need to listen. We can't just dismiss that kind of recommendation. In my personal experience, learning about articulation was really taught to me by a speech therapist. It's not something that I was taught in BCBA school or psychology school. I had to understand it from a speech therapist and what you target based on development, what makes sense, when does the R come in. And I was amazed to find out there's a huge gap in when certain consonant sounds can develop, 6 years, 7 years with R's and S's. And so understanding that, helps us to just be better providers and work collaboratively with other people. Social skills and pragmatic skills, there's a lot of expertise that speech therapists have in these areas that we can work with to help our learners gain all the skills that we are wanting to teach them. I think one of the little caveats I would offer is in looking at some of these articles, there seems to be this wide range of what they can do. They can do social skills, and they can do, and by the way, I'm saying speech therapy right now, articulation training, communication training, it seems pretty wide. They're not the only field who probably thinks that way, right? We feel we're teaching behaviors, we teach anything, sports psychology, we could teach it. So it becomes really critical to understand where our specializations are and what our training is so that we can work with other professions. So for example, developmental psychologists and behavior analysts, right? They have something to offer to what we understand about, child development and, sort of maybe phases of development or stages of development, if we want to call them that, because they've done a lot of observing of these behaviors, and so it is important to think about that in the same way that Sundberg developed his BB map, right? He drew from all of these other assessments that are out there in order to create something that we know might be the norm for development in order to acquire certain skills. Physical therapy has an ethics code. They certainly do state that their core value of integrity also acknowledges that they should be collaborating. Their statements seem a little bit more vague, right? So again, depending on which field you're reading about, it might not be as explicitly stated as some of the other fields. And I would say that the least collaboration I've had is with physical therapy, just because of the population that I work with. But certainly now that I'm in a public school setting, I definitely have more interactions with the physical therapists, and they know a lot about physical development and what they can help our students with. So if you've ever had to work with one, how you help a person lift up from a wheelchair, or how they're going to stand, or help move parts of their bodies if they have CP, like that's where their level of expertise comes in. I don't know about you, but if you've ever met someone that you're not used to working with that has a severe physical disability, I was scared the first time. Like, I didn't know what to do with a kid who was on a standing wheelchair and how they were communicating. Like, I had to be taught because I didn't know. I was afraid I would do the wrong thing or hurt them. And once you're educated and trained about this is how this person is and this is what we do in physical therapy to help them, you just feel like, okay. You can take a deep sigh of relief and know that you have this colleague who can help support what you need to do for them. Nurses, I would say that they probably have the most thorough ethical code, and in fact you can't just get it, you have to buy it, it's a book. But they really, the healthcare system really knows what they're talking about when they talk about collaboration. And whatever the reasons are for fueling that, they're good. And I think we have a lot to learn from them. Like, they were the most impressive in terms of just like the comprehensive standards that they have and the specificity with which they say to collaborate. In my experience in working with nurses, it's mostly been when a nurse has had to assess a student after a crisis, which they've been very helpful with, just to make sure that they're okay, they're not bleeding, or they're not hurt, or broken bone, and also to dispense medication. And this has always been in more of the private setting. I would have to say, like in my public school setting right now, I don't have a lot of contact with them, just because the population we have is just not as severe as in other places I've been. But, in the settings where I have been with our nurses, like, they are the team member, and they're called, and they're coming and watching and evaluating the student, on a daily basis, what they're coming in with in terms of, like, any possible injuries, and what they may be leaving with in terms of possible injuries, depending on crisis situations that may happen. Psychologists have a big code of ethics, and it does say that we should cooperate with other professionals and institutions, and again, to the extent needed to serve the best interests of that person. So this principle is like the principle of fidelity and responsibility. And I was trying to think of, because I'm a psychologist myself too, I'm a behavior analyst, and I have served like dual roles in my career. Like, I've done many assessments in terms of like IQ, diagnostic assessments for autism. And I was just trying to think, like, well, how am I collaborative when I'm in that role? And one of the things that I've encountered as being in the shoes of a psychologist is just sometimes how dismissive a behavior analyst can be of a psychologist. And like, that's just not, it didn't feel good, because I am one at times. And I was wondering, like, why that is. And, one of the things that was told to me is like, well, we don't believe in IQ. Like, we don't do it. And I'm like, okay. Let me think about that, because I don't know how to think about that. That's been a big part of my training when I was in graduate school. Learning how to conduct an IQ test, read a test, interpret a test, report on the test. And I started to think more recently, like, you know what, it's really not good to be dismissive, because in a colloquial sense, we're always talking about like high functioning and low functioning, and what the child understands and doesn't understand. So being able to collaboratively work with a psychologist is really important to understand like the functioning of a child in terms of, and I know it's not behavior analysis, cognitive functioning, but it is terminology that we use that we need to understand. And again, like, we want to be able to get into the other discipline's shoes to be able to understand what they're talking about. And I think probably everyone in this room has a sense of what IQ means, right? Raise your hand if you understand, like, generally, like, yeah, I get it, average, above average. And I was thinking, like, well, why can't IQ be behavior analytic? Because when I think of how I've done an IQ test, like the WISC or the Stanford NA, like, they're very specific questions, they're very standardized, you use materials, you're assessing behavior, they got it wrong or right, And then really the biggest difference is at the end, it's like the mean of all these responses that behavior analysis has more difficulty handling and interpreting. But when you think of what a child can do, for example, on a receptive vocabulary test and point to words, those are the very exact things that we're teaching in programs, when we're working on those skills. So they can inform a lot of, at a minimum, where we can start with a student who has like cognitive delays or functioning that is not typical for their age. So I would like for people not to be dismissive in that area. The other reason why we would want to work with psychologists is because not only are they doing assessments like IQ or diagnostic types of things, but they're working in counseling our students. They're doing therapies, cognitive behavior therapy, relaxation therapy. These are mindfulness approaches. These are all terms that are not necessarily friendly terms for our field. And I would argue that's because we just don't know how to conceptualize them, but you hear things like executive functioning skills, and it's like, oh, what does that mean? We have to be able to take that and interpret it and understand how to define those terms. And working with psychologists who are doing this and asking them, well, what is it? What are you doing when you're working on executive functioning skills? Oh, I'm helping Johnny to understand how he can unpack his backpack and put things in his locker. So we're working on planning and organization. Oh, okay, I get it. Now it's making sense. It's the terminology that they have, so being able to understand that is going to help us to be able to help them too. Parents. So they don't fall into our professional group, although some do, right? They overlap. They are part of the team. They don't need an ethical code to guide them, right? They're there to help their child. That's ethical enough, right? They are also often serving as sort of this bridge between two different disciplines, right? So can you imagine being a parent who's being told by an OT, they must do, sensory integration, and a speech therapist is saying, oh my gosh, don't even start PECs because they might, become dependent on using PECs and you're not going to learn to speak. And this is true, I've heard these arguments. And again, I'm argued by people who might not have been informed enough to make those educated decisions. And then it's up to them to bridge that. Or a behavior analyst is no, you got to do it 40 hours a week, and that's the only way we'll get your child to speak. It's really hard for them to be able to work for their child with a team of people who might not be agreeing in the first place. So finding ways to collaborate with the parent and also help support their decision making and the process that they're going to engage in through collaboration. It's going to be really important. The last thing a parent needs is to feel stressed out about oh, do I keep the speech therapist in this OT or this BCBA, or do I let them go and only do BCBA? I would argue it's not smart to do that. They certainly need to come to their own decisions about how can we help in that process. Again, you go back to what are the goals for the child, what do we know will work, and how can we work together on those same goals. And if there's ever a place where you can really experience that, it's early intervention, because it's the first time that parents may be encountering the disability, meeting all these professionals, and they're scared to death of what's going to happen for their child and what services they're going to get. So being able to collaborate and help support the collaboration of parents is really almost like the team leader in certain situations, because we need to be there to help them serve their child. And I would say that some of my best experiences came where the parents took on that role as a clinician. Paraprofessionals and assistants, or any other type of person providing aid. I couldn't find any formal unifying ethical code, and maybe I didn't do a deep enough search, but there are guidebooks that a lot of districts create, and they'll say like, oh, ethical guidelines, internally created, that really focus on themes of respect and communication amongst paraeducators or aides and other professionals like the teacher. So, and I would also say that this level of professions is critical that we collaborate with them, because they are the ones who are implementing a lot of like the direct service. And having them feel ignored or not having a voice is really, it's really hard to be part of the team if you feel it that way. So that's important. The other people who really need to help out is administration, and so obviously there's no ethical code for administration, but really if you're in administration you probably come from some field, so you're going to be accountable to that ethical code that you come from, like if you're a speech therapist, psychologist, behavior analyst, and the same rules apply, right? So having your administration work on and provide trainings for collaboration, no matter what setting you're in, is really important. And if it's not happening, it's something that we should be asking for more and more so. I know we do that in the beginning of the year often, because that's when you're meeting like maybe new personnel or new staff. And if you're in a school district, like that's a very big thing. You're part of an IEP team, you have to work collaboratively, so they emphasize that a lot. Whether or not they focus on sort of these specific principles that we talked about a little bit earlier, or just collaboration and respect of each other's perspective, is still questionable. But there is at least an attempt being made to draw people together to work for the benefit of the child. So some of the questions that you can ask when you're collaborating are, certainly like, what can I learn? And I've had to do that for myself. And sometimes I've had to do it when I felt like, well, I already learned this, like it doesn't work, like I gotta learn it again. But what can I learn this time from this person? Because you have to work with that person. So I can't tell you how many times I've been in a situation where, I see the weighted vest. And I know what I know about the weighted vest, and I've read all the articles that I read about the weighted vest. But the occupational therapist is going to continue to use that as an intervention. But for them, I'm the first time, and for me, it's the first time that we're interacting together. So I can't just go in there like, by the way, did you see the article on the fact that this doesn't work? Like, you just can't have that approach. Because it's just not going to work. So asking yourself, like, what can you learn? What can you absorb from this situation to help engage in some kind of learning process, both for the other discipline and for you, but also like what's the goal here? Like, what are you going to try and teach, to the student, to the other professional? What are you going to try and get out of it, and what are you going to try and help them get out of it as well? And inevitably, it's always going to end up being some kind of conversation, I hope, where you're talking about the student and how you can help. Other things that I've asked is also, what is my own area of expertise? Again, like if you haven't had to work with other professionals and other disciplines, what can you ask yourself in terms of what you know for your area of expertise, and then ask, like, well, what do they know? Right? So I feel like I've been in the field for a while, and I know some stuff, and I can offer, and I've been reinforced to offer my expertise in whatever it is, related to the treatment of a child or individual. I've had to challenge myself to be the same way in terms of asking the speech therapist or the occupational therapist, like, okay, they've been doing this for 30 years, or 25 years, or 12 years, whatever amount of years, what can they teach me? Have they, and you might encounter people where like you probably truly feel like they can't teach you anything because they're not flexible enough to be changing their ways, but it's still a good process to engage in, like, what, is there anything I can learn here? And if so, what is that? And And then how are you going to continue? Because you have to continue to work with that person. So it's worth engaging in the process if you have met somebody new that you need to collaborate with. Okay, so behavior analysts. We obviously are guided by our own ethical code, and there is code 2.3 that talks about consultation. And it does say that we should consult and provide referrals and collaborate with other professionals. I do feel like it was a little vague at times, because it does say in a manner that is consistent with the philosophical assumptions and principles of behavior analysis. So we're kind of being put in a tough spot because they're saying, like, make sure you're working under behavior analysis as a guiding theory. They're also saying work with other disciplines. And then we have another statement where it's asking us to recommend, when we're maybe discontinuing services, to recommend that appropriate service once a person might need other professional types of assistance or consultation. So that is also good. Like, we should be doing that, right? Like, if you don't know anything about feeding, you should gain that, get that consultation. Or if you don't know anything about vision, get that consultation, or speech therapy. And then we also have a professional responsibility as colleague to colleague within our field, so they're very specific about that. These are all good. And then we have the task list that says provide behavior analytic services in collaboration with others who support and or provide services to one's client. So they're saying collaborate, but they're saying do it, and let me know if I'm wrong, Mary Jane, because you probably know this better than I do, but they're saying provide under the theory of applied behavior analysis. So that, I feel like that's a tough spot to be in, because you have to find ways to do that. And it's also another way that we're trying to advance our own field, which I think is also very important. So, we then end up saying, oh, what does all this mean? Well, I don't know, let's talk about it. And you might meet people who are like, yep, it's only behavior analytic theory, and that's how it's going to be. And I love it when I meet people like, I don't know, let's think about that. What does it mean to provide CBT therapy? Or what does it mean to do mindfulness therapy? And I know our own field has started to engage in some of that research and look into those aspects of these other fields that are it's the field of psychology for us, but not exactly behavior analysis. So I think that's healthy, right? We're trying to engage with other not schools of thought, but other therapies and kind of test them out. And what are we talking about in terms of the principles of applied behavior analysis? Can we interpret it under applied behavior analysis?
Yeah. Is it okay if I say something?
Yes.
I was just going to say, I think you're kind of getting to the heart of the matter, though, in terms of collaboration challenges for our field of behavior analysis, and I know there are a lot of behavior analysts here. We have kind of, sadly, a well-earned reputation for not being the best collaborators on teams, and I think our arrogance sometimes gets in the way of that, and I feel like while we are schooled and trained in the need for evidence-based practice, sometimes the way that gets translated, especially in junior members of the field's interpretation of it, that maybe haven't had great supervision and training in collaboration, is that they come across as we do science, and I don't know about the rest of you. And I feel like that's so horrible, and we're so dismissive of other people's expertise and other people's knowledge base, and it's terrible. And I always say, to students in my collaboration class, I always say, these people have master's degrees too. These people went to school forever too. It's a whole field of study. It's not our worldview, but it is a worldview, and it is a profession associated with its own credentialing. And I think we have a long way to go in terms of tolerating diversity of opinion.
Right. Yeah, and that very well taken point. And I think that is one of the harder things to learn, right? Like, I'm glad to hear that you have a collaboration course, which I hope our field is moving towards offering things like that. And, you know, being able to just have a conversation, like, oh, you know, like, it's, for some of us, like you said, us juniors out there maybe, it's a hard conversation to have because you're given, like, this coursework and this is how you're supposed to think, and if you have a thought, like, well, how do you explain this and how do you explain that? Like, I've had those thoughts myself. Like, how do you explain, you know, what I'm thinking about right now and how that's been reinforced and you can't see it and you can't measure it, but, you know, like, I'm not the most fluent person when it comes to explaining behavior analysis for the daily things that we actually do, you know, and, you know, other fields might have different worldviews and different interpretations of how things work, and we need to just get better at explaining ourselves and also understanding just other people's perspective. See here.
I think you also needed to, in terms of like looking at behavior. Also, I think if we look at the behaviors from just AD perspective, I think we can also, and we're dismissive of like of OT or speech, I think we also limit ourselves in understanding why behavior may be occurring. Because sometimes, you know, you try a behavior plan or an intervention and it doesn't work, and you're going, okay, why is this behavior occurring? And
you don't have an explanation.
Yeah, and then when you have someone who said, well, hey, I had a recent case where a kid was engaging in something with behaviors and they couldn't figure it out, and trying all this stuff. Turns out, you know, it was part of the developmental stage, and when it came from an OT, yeah, it was an OT. You know, it made me think of it like, wow, there are different ways of looking at why behavior is occurring. It's not always just the environment. It's internal, it's external, it's everything. So I think we really limit ourselves when we don't consider all the variables. And includes internal variables.
Yeah. I'm going to talk about a really interesting article that I came across that talks about that very point. So some things that I've personally done is, you know, again, like I think I touched on this earlier, is just, you know, look at and learn about those particular curriculums, right? So if it's handwriting, if it's feeding, like what are the protocols that are out there? You know, what are the medications that are being used to treat whatever behavior? Like, I don't know about you guys, but when I had to talk to psychiatrists, you know, like when you ask the question, so what behavior is this medication supposed to affect? There's no straight answer, right? Like it either is going to dull a person totally because of the amount of medication they're on, you know, maybe decrease some of like the aggressive behavior or intensity. But it's a very, you know, loaded question to a psychiatrist who's also trying to help this individual. One experience that I had with working with a psychiatrist was extremely helpful with a young lady who had like very severe OCD type behavior and self-injury. She had been on a medication being treated by another psychiatrist who didn't really have the knowledge and expertise of obsessive compulsive disorder. So we found one who did, and when we explained, like, here are the medications that this child is on, and here are the behaviors that we see, and he looked at the medication regimen and saw that she was on Prozac, but was on the level of Prozac that to the initial treating psychiatrist, you know, was like, oh, this is the dosage we start people on. But to this OCD expert, he said, like, well, the dosage that she's on is actually serving to activate all of these obsessive, compulsive types of behaviors. And he lowered the dosage, and very, very soon after that, like, the behavior really, really changed significantly for this person. So again, like, it was two psychiatrists, but like one had like this specialty, like, you know, world-renowned expert in OCD who has treated OCD over and over again, including with autism, who just was able to look at medication and make some changes that were very significant for this individual. Other questions is, you know, again, like what the goal of the interventions are for the specific client. Like, just know what's the goal. Okay, so you're going to use light and so what's the goal? You're going to sit quietly for 5 or 10 minutes? Okay. And how are you measuring that? And not in a way that makes people feel defensive, right? Like, because that's the last thing you want to make them feel. And again, like in our field, like it's easy to make somebody feel that way. People are so intimidated about data collection and graphs. Like, it really is a true fear that I've seen in my own district. But just to help them think it through, because maybe they just haven't thought about it in that way. How long has the intervention been going on? One experience that I had in a private setting, again, I was the clinical director of a small program out in Brooklyn, in New York, and I was just coming into a situation where the school really needed a lot of help. It was all pretty severely impacted individuals with autism, and there was a little girl who was about 9 years old, and she had a great speech therapist who ended up going to get her BCBA, and I feel like I pat myself on the shoulder a little bit for helping motivate her to want to do that. But she had been treating this little girl using non-speech oral motor exercises for something like 7 years, doing the exact same routine day in and day out, 2 or 3 times a day in the school setting. And I was just I was really flabbergasted, but it was also the first time I'd really seen it in action, because I was coming from Rutgers, where we just don't do that, we know better. And I'd never seen what is this end zones that they talk about, what are these whistles and bells and tongue elevations, and you watch it and you're it was to perfection. The kid could lift their tongue, blow on horns. Beautiful, 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 compliant, just did everything right for 7 years. And I asked one question, so what's changed in 7 years? Has anything changed? Because it was all to increase strength to help them talk. Which we know, all of that does nothing to help you talk. It's just different mechanisms in the brain that help you talk, and it's not that. And it was a question that, literally, not that I intended, but made the speech therapist cry. She's nothing has changed in 7 years. And it was just amazing to see, how impactful that just, it has just been that world, right? They weren't able to step out and see what is the difference. Because it wasn't a place where they had enough clinical guidance and training. But this person was trying so hard to help this child. And she did all those things beautifully. She was brilliant at it. But again, nothing in terms of helping her to become vocal or verbal, for that matter. And the amount of cleaning and sanitizing that went into just the toolkit, it was what was time being wasted. I was well, and I didn't say this to the therapist, but that's what I was thinking, my goodness, we need to change this. And we were able to change it, but it was going on for 7 years. Having conversations, talking about what might be causing, what's the root of the problem, asking your colleague what they've done, what data they've kept, what have they tried, right? When you go into kind of assess behavior, if you're a behavior analyst, so what have you tried already? What have you done? I've used tokens, I've used picture schedules, and there's a routine in place. It's good to have that conversation. You want to make sure you cover ground, and also help you to engage in behavior that is, part of collaboration. I want to hear what you have to say. What is your perspective on this problem? So that you can work together. So Kelly and Tinkani, I mentioned this earlier, they did a survey back in 2013 where they sampled 302 respondents, and they were people who had their BCBAs, BCA-Bs, and also non-BCBA people, just to ask about what their experiences were with collaboration. And I think it's possibly one of the first studies that attempts to get at collaboration within our field. And they, their goal was just, have you received collaboration training? What have been your experiences? What facilitates or inhibits collaboration? And the extent to which behavioral professionals view collaboration as a valuable component of their practice. Not surprisingly, everybody thinks that collaboration is really important. and that they want to collaborate. And they define collaboration as a component of consultation involving voluntary interpersonal interactions comprising of two or more professionals engaging in communication modalities for the purpose of shared decision-making and problem-solving toward a common goal and resulting in changes to tasks and solutions that would not have been achieved in isolation. Right? So this is not so dissimilar to like the first definition I shared with you in the beginning of the presentation, where the healthcare professionals are saying like, you know, we're going to come together across different fields and work for the betterment of the client. So this is how they specifically define collaborations and on this survey. Maybe some of you have done it. I think I remember doing this. And their finding was that there was little to no formal training collaboration, despite 62% of the respondents reporting that they collaborate on a daily basis. So that was like an eye-opener for us, right? Like we're not teaching the behavior collaboration as a field, so we need to start doing that. It sounds like we are. Now, 67% of the respondents reported no course work with collaboration or a title or a description of a course with the word collaboration in it. And moderate agreement that collaboration was modeled for them during internship experiences. So that was really interesting. You know, so people are saying, they were asked, like, you know, does somebody model how this is done? So earlier I talked about like my own memories of collaboration and seeing what that might be like in the totally non-ABA world. And it wasn't the intention that it was modeled for me, it's just like what I remember about it. But behavior analysts, non-behavior analysts are just saying like, you know, they are moderately agreeing that some of this was modeled, right? So even other fields may not be, you know, engaging in this process where they're actively teaching what it means to collaborate. And then the respondents agree that they want more training in collaboration, right? So everybody wants to get more of it. So I think perhaps like one of the findings that really resonated with me was that, and maybe it will with you too if you read the article, is that the process of collaboration was seeming unidirectional, like it was only going in one way when the respondents sent back their surveys. The way in which they collaborated was they were called, like as the behavior analysts, to go in and tell somebody what to do. And so you can imagine, like, the perception that people have of behavior analysts is like, we're always telling them what to do. And I was asked to consult, so I tell you what to do, like that's kind of the model, right? Like you consult to tell people what to do. And that is totally unidirectional. Like there's no give and take, like let's work together. So I thought that was interesting. Like now we know this piece of information, like how can we change even the consultation models that we might have out there? So again, collaboration amongst behavior analysts and non-behavioral professionals might be like a one-way street right now in terms of what we found, and that behavior interventions developed without teacher input. We know that if you don't get teacher input, it's just less likely that they're going to be implemented. How many of you have had that experience? Like if you're not getting that input, then you would tell somebody what to do. It's just not, it doesn't come across well, and they're just less likely to do it. We have research on that. And then in addition, low ratings for the degree of likelihood of adoption of recommendations from the physical therapist, educator, OT, like all of that just drops to very low. The likelihood that they're going to do it if there's no soliciting of collaboration or being genuine about it too, I would say. So given that IEPs dictate coordination of services, right, and it's across varying professionals in the team, this is really important. Like we need to be able to find ways in which everybody has a say at the table, and there's respect there, and there's conversation about it, so that we can, move forward with what needs to get done. So some of the things that would help, like collaborative directive approach, might be, according to Kellington County, shared decision making, respecting rights to reject interventions too, and making prescriptive recommendations. I thought, respecting the right to reject an intervention was also interesting that they would write that. Like, do we have to agree that we have to do this type of intervention, especially if we know the evidence is not there? So they're saying, like, you should feel comfortable rejecting something. It doesn't have to be in a nasty way or a way that turns off conversation, but it's something that we can train in our graduate programs and undergraduate programs to engage in. With regard to individuals with autism spectrum disorder, Broadhead did a study in 2015 where he discusses maintaining professional relationships in an interdisciplinary setting, and he offers some really interesting strategies for navigating non-behavioral treatment recommendations for individuals with autism. So this is specific to autism, but like what we can do to help navigate some of these sort of sticky situations that we might find ourselves in. So we often in the field may have questioned treatments that are not evidence-based or that are non-behavioral. And he says, like, as soon as we question these treatments, then that's an automatic, like, it leads to like some kind of erosion. It's like, why are you questioning it? Like, already you're putting up a wall, now we're not going to be able to work together. So he's saying, like, the very fact that we have to question a treatment leads to like this erosion in collaboration, which I think is true in a lot of cases. So he offers like a decision-making model, right? So like, here's how we can determine whether or not we are even going to question the treatment. And he says, that we're going to start with like, we identify what the non-behavioral intervention is, and then offers like this decision tree where, the first question that you're going to ask is it a safety risk, right? So, okay, you're going to use weighted vests. Is there a safety risk in using a weighted vest? Like, he's literally saying, like, do we need to challenge this right now? And if there's no safety risk, he's basically saying that you can become familiar with that treatment, right? So learn a little bit about it, right? And then it goes all the way down to learning how to then engage in decision making about the treatment itself once you understand it. And the very first thing he does say is that there's some sort of risk of physical harm or emotional harm to the child, and you should absolutely address it. So they are being very clear about that. But there's no immediate imminent risk to the child. Start learning about it, and then what can you do after you learn a little bit about it? Is the treatment success possible when it's translated into behavioral principles? I thought that was also very interesting, right? Because we're always talking about, like, well, how do we explain this with an applied behavior analytical lens? And if we're able to explain it from an applied behavior analytic lens, we're going to be more likely to understand it and then, like, be like, oh, okay, well, I see what you mean. I get it. Receptive language and expressive language, and, with expressive language, we're using words like tacts and mans and interverbals. And I feel like the speech world has done a pretty good job of adopting our language, so, we can try and do the same thing in our discipline, in terms of just like understanding what that intervention is. And then will the treatment negatively interfere with the goals of the client? If you feel like this treatment will, then they offer this thing called the CAPT. And it's sort of like 7 steps of analyzing the proposed treatment. So they're saying, like, is it a function-based treatment, right? Like, let's start there. Is this function-based? Is this going to help address the concerns that the individual has with regard to replacement behavior, teaching other types of skills that they're going to need, decreasing challenging behavior? Is there skill acquisition involved? Will the treatment result in the acquisition of functional skills? Is there a good social outcome to this treatment, right? So these are all questions that as behavior analysts we're going to be able to ask no matter what. Is there a data question? I think one of the most powerful things we can do is like, okay, we'll try the weighted test and see if it helps Johnny sitting in circle time. What kind of data would you like to see? I can help you to collect some data, because a lot of times we find that in other disciplines they're just afraid of the data. Not afraid of the data, but might not have been trained and have the skills to track it the way maybe we would. And then sometimes you'd be surprised, like they are tracking it in their notes or anecdotal way, and let's just formalize this process so that we both understand it. Is there treatment integrity? Is there social validity? And then what are some other resources that we have should the treatment not require significant financial resources? So it's interesting that somebody in our field is offering like a decision-making tree. And again, it's a start. It might not be perfect, but like we are thinking about it, and I think that's important. So more broadly, the field of behavior medicine and ABA collaboration is a really interesting field, and I did come across this article by Greenwald, Roos, and Williams. It was recently published. It's actually one of the nicest articles I've read in a long time, where they talk about just behavioral medicine having been around for a long time, and just what it means to be working in an interdisciplinary way with applied behavior analysis. And one of the things that it says is that the interdisciplinary field concerned with the development and integration of socio-cultural, psychosocial, behavioral, and biomedical knowledge relevant to health and illness, and the application of this knowledge to disease prevention, health, promotion, etiology, diagnosis, treatment, and rehabilitation. So this was published in Behavior and Social Issues, and the field of behavioral, that's how the field is defined. Behavioral medicine was established, founded in 1977. And their whole vision is like behavior health through behavior change. And so the way in which behavior medicine impacts really like the world is, I think, very vast in terms of the areas that they address. And how they use psychology and ABA to sort of help clarify how fields collaborate. This sort of matrix just sort of helps us to understand like what it means to have biological treatment based on biological and behaviors of the organism, and where they sort of intersect. So psychological treatment and psychological conditions may sometimes be treated by psychology and applied behavior analysis. And I think what was really interesting about the article is that they're saying like a biological or medical approach to treatment typically includes the use of pharmaceuticals, surgery. Like this is how biology and medicine are defined. And in some way it alters like the physical body in some way, whereas the psychological treatment approach typically includes manipulation of variables, environmental variables like we do in applied behavior analysis. And he's saying that research and practice in the behavioral medicine falls somewhere between the two sciences, right? So typically including a biological condition of the body and a psychological treatment approach is what ABA might do. And then they go on to say that instead of assuming a causal relationship in biological factors, that biological factors are the causes of psychological behaviors, we just need to understand that biology is an essential factor in behavior and not causal. And I think it's important because and Skinner also said, the organism is the organism, right? So you can never teach, for example, a fish to climb a tree because that's not the constitution of the organism. And there's a certain biology that the fish comes with. In the same way that people might be different, right? Like, if you are born without a limb, like there are certain things that we're just not going to be able to teach you because that is the biology that we came with. So this article really just makes you think about, at least it did for me, how we can, understand both, the medical world and biology and behavior analysis, and how we can use them together to understand like the functioning of organisms and humans in general. So there are all these factors, right? There's evolution, there's physiology, maturation, ecology, right? So like with maturation, like you're never going to go teach an 18-month-old to speak in full sentences because they're just not developmentally mature enough to be able to handle that. And that is directly related to the biology of a person and development in terms of maturation. One area of major ABA contribution that in behavior medicine that ABA has had is in behavioral pediatrics, and I thought this was interesting. This is a branch of medicine that focuses on the relationship between behavior and childhood medical care, and areas that are impacted by this are toileting, feeding, sleeping, dental issues. And again, just 20 years ago when I was first learning about ABA, maybe a little bit more than 20 years ago, maybe toileting was something we talked about in terms of training, children how to take care of themselves and go to the bathroom. But, feeding wasn't necessarily something that we talked about on a daily basis. It was mostly about like skill acquisition related to language and cognitive skills and puzzles and imitation. But now, like, there are specific specializations of our own field into these areas that cross over into what's considered to be the field of behavioral medicine. So other areas in which ABA has had a hand in is brain injury, Tourette's, obesity, smoking cessation, inappropriate sexual behavior, self-injury. Again, these are all areas that have like probably a very strong biological component that we need to work with other disciplines in order to understand. So Greenwald also asks, like, how are we collaborating as a field? Like, our own field is just, it hasn't been good at collaborating. And it's kind of sad and a little ironic because one of the things that, Skinner said was that he envisioned ABA to be this, be relevant and applicable to virtually all human behavior. And that vision of his has, been not realized yet. Largely as a result of possibly a narrow scope of how we function as a field. So being able to, reach out into other fields and work with them can be, very good for our field and help others understand what we do. And some of this is really happening in the behavioral pediatrics world. Such as the work of, I think, like Kathleen Piazza and people like her who work specifically in feeding, sleeping issues. I know Greg Hanley has done a lot of interesting work on that. And again, like those are all things like, I've tried to help families with sleeping, including my own, and it's hard when you feel like you can't control the variables, the A's, the B's, and the C's in terms of the environment, because something else might be happening that we need to try to understand from a biology perspective. And again, it doesn't mean that it's causal, but it means that we need to understand like how it works in terms of maturation and all these other variables that we just talked about. I was looking on YouTube to see if anything interesting would come up in terms of collaboration. I actually found this really interesting video that I'd love to share with you. It's about 14 minutes. Is it okay if I show that? It's really good because I think it will just help you encapsulate like everything that I've said today. And it's like totally not about ABA, but it's about ABA. And he does like an amazing job talking about some of these issues. So after the video, I think I'm pretty much done, but I'm definitely here to take some questions. So let's take a look at what Mr. Jim Tan has to say. He'll tell you what he is, but he's very interesting. He kind of reminds me of Skinner because he's tall, he has white hair, glasses. So let's see. Is it coming up? Can I link to it? You can't link to it.
You have it on your laptop?
I do my laptop, but that's not here. I set it up so that I just click on it and it should go to it.
You usually won't link to it if it doesn't see it in the same device, in my opinion.
Is it on YouTube?
Yeah, it's on YouTube. We could just Google it or YouTube it.
I want to share something with you today that I believe will make you much more effective at resolving conflict and building collaboration. But I want to start by telling you a little story about some groups of chickens. Believe it or not, chickens have a lot to teach us about collaboration. This takes place at Purdue University, where Bill Muir is a professor of genetics and a genuinely nice guy. And Bill was looking into the differences between groups of collaborative chickens. These were just chickens that got along well with each other. I call them the green zone chickens. And there were no star performers in their group. They were just nice to each other. And in the chicken world, the star performer is the hen that lays the most eggs. But the problem with the star performers is that they tend to be much more aggressive animals. And so we oftentimes see among the chickens something that we occasionally see in human organizations, and that is that the star performers become the stars, not by being so good themselves, but by suppressing the egg production of the other chickens. So they look better, and they do this by pecking on them. Now, I call these more aggressive star performers the red zone chickens, and they do a lot of damage. So the farmers have tried different strategies to deal with that. One is to house the birds in individual cages about this big. Not a great solution because it's very expensive, it takes millions of cages. Another thing they tried is something that's called trimming their beaks. Now, this is a bit of a deceptive term because it gives you the impression that there's a chicken manicurist out there sort of filing down the sharp point. But really, it's an employee with the tools that looks a little bit like a pair of pliers, and they go up and rip a big chunk of the chicken's beak right off its head. Also very expensive, not to mention horribly unpleasant for all the chickens and the employee that's assigned to do that. So Bill was trying to see if it's possible to breed collaborative instincts into chickens, and if so, what would be the impact of that on their egg production. So we had all the green zone chicken groups over there and the red zone chicken groups over there, and he took the best of each generation's egg producers to produce the next generation. He did this for 1 year, about 5 generations, and at the end of that 1 year period, the results were pretty dramatic. There, this is a picture of the green zone chickens. They were healthy and productive. Now the next picture is what was left of the red zone chickens. And I say it's what was left of them because more than half of the red zone chickens had been murdered by their colleagues, heck to death. Now, they say that a picture is worth 1,000 words, but if this doesn't tell the whole story, let's look at the egg production of the green zone chickens. In that 1 year period of time, it went up 260%. So what we can learn from these chickens is that red zone environments that are more hostile, that are more adversarial, highly conflicted, internally competitive versus externally competitive, they produce more red zone behavior. It feeds on itself and can spread like a virus in an organization. And green zone environments that are more supportive and cooperative and more highly skilled in collaboration, they produce more eggs, or whatever your organization's equivalent is to more eggs. Now, I'd like you to think back on that picture of those red zone chickens again for just a minute. Get that in your mind. As a judge for almost 25 years, my jurisdiction was collective bargaining disputes, labor management conflicts. And in that role, I believe that I have mediated more school district labor strikes than any other person in the United States. In just about every single strike that I have ever mediated, By the time we get to the end of that process, every single person involved in that process, on both sides of the table, knows exactly what those chickens feel like. Because that is the existence that they are trapped in. Now, these are not mean people. These are good people doing their imperfect best to improve the world the best way they know how. I mean, they've all dedicated their lives to public education. They didn't lack an interest in collaboration. What they lacked was skills. And this lack of skills was costing the state of California a tremendous amount of money in the cost of conflict. So a small group of us got together, we did a lot of research, and we set out to teach the more adversarial red zone groups to be more collaborative. We were wildly successful. Trust went up, conflicts went down. We reduced the amount of measurable conflict in almost 100 different organizations by almost 70% over several years. It saved the state of California a huge amount of money. It also transformed the working lives of thousands of employees who have been trapped in that red zone chicken existence, which in turn, I believe, improved the quality of education for thousands of school kids who finally had positive role models who could teach them how to resolve their differences without destroying their community or going to war with each other. And what we learned from this experience is not just limited to public education. It is applicable in any setting that requires collaboration, whether that's a family trying to figure out where to go on vacation together, or the corporate world where it has become blindingly obvious lately that you cannot compete externally if you can't first collaborate internally, or even in politics, where the defensiveness of our Congress probably costs as much as the entire defense budget at the Pentagon. So what I'd like to do is share with you today what I believe is the biggest learning from that experience, and that's this. There is nothing that will help you become more effective at resolving conflict and building collaboration more than better managing your own defensiveness. In over 25 years of working with other people's conflict, I almost never had to deal with pure legal issues. People were almost always before me because somebody would start feeling vulnerable, and then they would get defensive. And when we get defensive, our thinking becomes rigid, our IQ drops about 20 points, and we simply become stupid. And not only are we terrible problem solvers ourselves, but then we invite everybody else in the room to get defensive. And then what you end up with is a whole room filled with red zone people who cannot solve a problem. The technical term for that, by the way, is litigation. It's as simple as this. If you reduce your defensiveness, you increase your ability to solve problems. Now, if we know that's true, why don't we just stay non-defensive and keep a more collaborative green zone mindset all the time? So I'd like you to try something with me that may give you some insight into that question. I would like you to use all your creativity and empathy to let yourself become one with this piece of paper. Know what it feels like to be this piece of paper. Nice and cool to the touch, and crisp edges, and a few sharp corners, and a few wrinkles like some of us have. So in just a minute, I'm going to ask you all to take a deep breath. We'll do this all together. And as you exhale, I would like you to focus all your attention on this piece of paper and just see if it's possible for you to breathe yourself right into this piece of paper and become one with it. Okay, is everybody ready? All right, go. Okay, everybody have that now? Now, anybody want to collaborate with me right now? Or build a relationship with me right now? Or more likely, anybody have any really strong negative red zone feelings towards me right now? So I apologize for this, but I wanted to do this because I wanted you to see how easily and quickly you can move from the green zone, where pretty much everybody was in this room just a minute ago, into the red zone. And when it happens, it can happen just that fast. And when it happens, we don't have defenses. They have us. They own us. They become our operating system. And they determine how we see the rest of the world out there. And the problem is, it's almost all unconscious stuff. So we don't even recognize that we're getting defensive until it's too late. So here's our premise about defensiveness. When we get defensive, we are not defending ourselves from another person. We are defending ourselves from fears inside of us that we don't want to feel. 3 big fears that come up all the time. Fears about our own significance, our competence, and our likability. Let me give you an example. Pretend I have some big fears about my own competency for doing this TED Talk today. And say it's going really badly. Maybe I'm jet lagged and forgetting things and no one's paying attention. That can cause me a lot of discomfort because, believe me, I do not like feeling incompetent at all. So one way that I could avoid a lot of that discomfort is I might start blaming you. I mean, after all, you are not the smartest group I have ever worked with, And really, does anybody here think it's possible to teach the whole audience to be non-defensive in the puny little 18 minutes that I've got for this? I mean, give me a break. Now, it might seem like I'm defending myself against a bad audience or a bad situation. But what I'm really doing is I'm behaving in a way that lets me not be in touch with those fears. Our defensiveness helps us hide our fears from ourselves. But unfortunately, that is an awful lot like putting whipped cream on dog poop. And I know that's a really ugly metaphor, but I'll bet you'll remember that one. If you're getting defensive, it's because there's some fear there. But since most of us are not sufficiently in tune with that fear to do anything about it until it's too late, what can be more helpful for most of us is to start paying attention to the outward behavior that we do. Our outward signs of defensiveness are usually much easier to spot at a much earlier point in the process. So if we know what our signs of defensiveness are, they can become our own personalized early warning system. For example, I notice that when I get defensive, my breathing becomes faster, I tend to talk much louder, and I usually feel very misunderstood. So if I'm getting some feedback from my friends, and I notice that I'm breathing faster, talking louder, and feeling very put upon, the alarm bells can go off. Ding, ding, ding. Hey, Jim, pay attention. You're doing that thing. Then I can take some action. So it is worth your while to figure out what your specific signs of defensiveness are, and then create your own early warning system. Now, we've come up with a list of about 50 different signs of defensiveness. But these are just a few of the more common ones. So take a look at this and see whether any of these look familiar to you. If you don't see your favorites up there, or even more importantly, if you happen to be sitting out in the audience right now thinking to yourself, well, I don't really get defensive. Let me suggest to you that you are probably in complete denial or overly medicated. Because defensiveness, this is a human condition. So if you're one of those few people on earth that thinks they don't get defensive, when you go home tonight, I would suggest you ask your spouse or your kids. I've found family members to be remarkably willing to help out on this task. Usually very accurate, too. So your job is to figure out what your specific signs of defensiveness are and then create your own early warning system. Then when it tips you off that you're getting defensive, here's a few things that you can do that can help. Number one, acknowledge to yourself that you're getting defensive. Now, that may not seem like it's a big deal, but if you don't notice it, you won't take any other action. Number two, do whatever you can do to slow down your physiology. Maybe take a walk around the building and get some fresh air. Or if you're trapped in a meeting, just take a few deep breaths. Number three, pay attention to your self-talk. If you're engaging in negative self-talk, consciously try to turn it into something a little more positive and a little less toxic for you. Number four, create an action step that is directly related to whatever your sign of defensiveness is. So, for example, if your sign is flooding with information to prove a point, maybe your action step would be just to be quiet for 10 or 15 seconds. Just zip it up. If it's high charge of energy in the body, maybe it's take a few deep breaths or visualize some relaxing scene. If it's a sudden drop in IQ, do something that's going to buy you a little time to let your thinking process catch up with the rest of your body. Maybe hang out in the restroom for a few minutes. One woman, her sign was always wanting the last word, and so she got this image of herself standing at the conference room door, throwing in the last word and slamming the door. And it was a way of not only reminding her of what she was doing, but also lighten up your mood a little bit. So you create your action step. Then number 5 is, this is a recovery model. This is not a model of perfection. So if you get defensive, like we all will, you notice that you take some action and then start over and let it go. So to recap, when you leave here today, the 2 most helpful next steps for you will be, number 1, figure out what your signs of defensiveness are and create your own early warning system. And then number 2, figure out an action step and practice it. You want to practice it so it becomes automatic, because the worst time to be figuring out how to deal with your defensiveness is when you're defensive. Now, if you can do both of these things, I guarantee you will significantly increase your chances of ending up like a green zone person rather than one of those red zone chickens. In the words of one of our wisest, greatest modern day philosophers, it's not easy being green. But let me tell you, it's a whole lot easier and a lot more effective than being red, and it could just make a big difference in your life. Thank you very much.
Disputed behavioral, right? I like that one. So I think that's all I have. I think my very last slide was actually just, how cool it was that he did have sort of he had like a whole plan, a behavioral plan for like collaboration and being defensive, like identify the problems, suggest the strategies, task analyze the intervention, and focus on like a significantly social issue. And he's not a behavior analyst. And he did some really good things in California, it seems. One last thing, this is a total paraphrasing of someone else giving a collab talk, but I love the analogy because she was saying, if you hold a rock in your hand by yourself, no one's going to see it. But you need a team to help you move a boulder, and everyone can see it. Right? So in order to be collaborative, like everyone's got to see what's happening, and you have to work as a team. So hopefully, through collaboration, we can all like move boulders together. Questions?
We have time for questions. Questions or comments?
Yeah, I have a question about like what do you do when you have people who are not working together, or you have like, and that's a big thing that I go into content class sometimes is that you get a team together and you have that red zone going on, they blame each other, or they think you say, what's the answer, how do we fix it, and you like together. So I mean, in my I work with adults with intellectual disabilities, and that's a big thing, especially when resources are really kind of scarce.
Yeah.
So any suggestions?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough question. Some of the it's a good question because I'm sure it comes up a lot. But like some of the strategies that both our field is suggesting and other fields is like, why aren't they collaborating? Like, what are the barriers to that, to them collaborating? Is it something that they're not understanding? Are they informed about the intervention? Do they not, adhere to it or believe in it? So being able to ask those specific questions, and also, it makes a difference. Like, what are they being invited to come and work? Like, can we work together? Here's what you can do. Here's what I can do to collaborate. I think, depending on the organization and the setting, it does make a difference to know, like, who's in charge of that team or that process, and to voice those concerns to that person. Not necessarily as a complaint initially, but to say, like, what can I do to change my behavior to get them to collaborate? Because I think that shows, like, you're willing to try something different. So I would try and start there.
One of the things I think that you made a major point on, and I thought was fantastic, and I've been trying myself, is just asking questions to really generate discussion. Because sometimes, like, we don't know what to do, you do something and asking questions, I find that kind of helps. What do you think? I mean, just like, what are your thoughts, and then asking people to speak and what their thoughts are.
Right.
Listen.
Yeah, one of the things that's happening in my current work is I'm the behavior analyst for the district, and I'm the only one. So, and it's a small district, but it's substantial. And so, I guess I have a reputation. Like I go to all the schools, and I'm able to, do FBAs and give behavior plans. But now, the things that are not necessarily a behavior plan or FBA kind of situation, I'm being called for like the little things. And so now I have to kind of throw it back on them, like, oh, well, what have you done? What have you tried? And just propose, reinforce the skills that they already have. And, what I'm finding is like there's maybe a little tolerance of teachers to, where they have a little tolerance for certain behaviors. And we're talking like mild behaviors, probably nothing that you would see as a concern here at Valmark. But it's been a challenge for me to be like, well, no, I'm not here to help with that. And I know that you want my help, but what are the skills that you have that you can engage in? And what have you done with your team, your immediate team, to help this student? And it's moving out of the realm of like special education into the gen ed world, just like conflict resolution with peers and things like that. So it's interesting how ABA is, in my opinion, like really being drawn upon and seen. And I think it's a direct result of how open I've been to collaborating with, like, really too much with everybody, where, like, now I have to start saying no because I can't get the other responsibilities that I have done. So offering help is good, but then be careful because you also want to be able to be like, you can do that. Have somebody else help you with their expertise. I mean, there are teachers who've been around for many years doing this for a long time, so trust that they have skills too. Yeah. Any other questions? Thank you so much for your time.